America's Voice Live, America's fastest growing news program. With Steve Gruber.
We've got to put America first. You do that by voting and bringing your friends to do the same.
Delivering the latest news, observations, and opinions. With the entire Real America's Voice team, America's Voice Live starts now.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gruber. Today is Monday, March 6, 2023. Let's get to the day's top stories, and thank you for starting the week here on America's Voice Live. How does America win the cultural battle raging on within itself? Joining me live to shed some light, our former Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, our good friend here. We'll share more. Meanwhile, overseas, China amping up its efforts in the military budget as experts say a new invasion is on the way. And later, protesters at UC Santa Barbara tried to shut down a Charlie Kirk appearance. A Turning Point contributor will join us live for the latest on that. These stories and more coming up on America's Voice Live. Good to have you here. Thank you. Dear Democrats, where have you gone? I mean it. Where have the real Democrats gone? What happened to the millions of Americans that proudly stood up for America, waved the flag, stood up for the national anthem, celebrated the 4th of July? These are all serious questions. Ivy and I spent time in Arlington National Cemetery over the weekend. And if you've never stood there and looked around, it is something, as an American, you simply must do. Every American should go to Arlington National Cemetery. You read the names of the famous and the names of those from West Virginia, New York, New Mexico, and every other corner of our nation. People you've never heard of that serve with distinction to protect our God-given inalienable rights that we still enjoy today, but are also threatened more than ever. We stood at the eternal flame burning at the tomb of John F. Kennedy, and I reflected on who we were as a nation in 1963 and who we are today. When JFK delivered his inaugural address, we were staring down the barrel of the Soviet Union's growing nuclear arsenal. Cuba was hostile and antagonistic just 90 miles south of Florida. The Berlin Wall divided the capital of the German people, half in the west, the other half in the east, under the iron fist of Nikita Khrushchev and the communists. Democrats didn't call America names or accuse her people of being victims or oppressors. We knew exactly who we were, no matter which side of the political aisle we stood on. We were Americans, proud Americans, willing to fight and die for this nation. Black and white, rich and poor, from all backgrounds and all walks of life. JFK pointed out how few in human history had the God-given opportunity to fight for the freedom of all men and all women, and the honor of doing so was quite special. Listen to this.
Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
Pay any price, bear any burden, to guarantee the survival of liberty. Hearing that is, to me, truly remarkable. I mean, honestly, I can barely remember when the Democrats were insulting someone or some group of Americans while screaming racism or some other cheap smear job, just because they don't agree with the other person's point of view. There was a time when they could still tell the difference between a man and a woman, and more importantly, there was a time when they could still tell the difference between right and wrong. Sadly, today, those on the left have turned victimhood into an industry to harvest hundreds of millions and, well, sometimes billions of dollars, and harvest votes with taxpayers' money at the same time. It's all about power and control, and it appears more often the destruction of freedom, the freedom of speech, the right to keep and bear arms, the right to think whatever you want to think and to worship freely. All of these foundational principles are now in jeopardy in this country. That's not the world JFK was looking at as he addressed the crowd on a cold, clear January 20th, 1961. He was looking at the awesome responsibility he had been given, and in fact, all Americans had been given by those that had gone before. Many who were then and still are interred at Arlington National Cemetery, The 35th president could not conceive that he would join them in our nation's most sacred ground less than 3 years later. But he certainly knew the dangers we faced from a hostile communist nation. He warned, like so many before and since, that weakness brings war and destruction. Listen.
We dare not tempt them with weakness, for only when our arms are sufficient beyond doubt can we be certain beyond doubt that they will never be employed. But neither can two great and powerful groups of nations take comfort from our present course, both sides overburdened by the cost of modern weapons, both rightly alarmed by the steady spread of the deadly atom, yet both racing to alter that uncertain balance of terror that stays the hand of mankind's final war.
Once again, America is facing a hostile communist nation, but this time, regardless of what we are fed each day by the corporate media, our most dangerous enemy is not Russia. It is not the war in Ukraine. It is without a doubt the Chi-Coms in Beijing. But this challenge is not unique today, nor was it in 1961. The players may change, but the game is very much the same. Here, JFK speaks on the ultimate sacrifice in the battle for freedom.
Since this country was founded, each generation of Americans has been summoned to give testimony to its national loyalty. The graves of young Americans who answered the call to service surround the globe.
At Arlington National Cemetery, just a few steps from where the eternal flame that burns over the grave of JFK and his family, are inscriptions from that inaugural address. None that seems so profound today as the one in the very middle, this one.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world.
I embrace it. I welcome it. The right to defend freedom, to defend liberty, to defend this great nation, to defend America. So I ask you, Democrats, where is that Democrat Party today? Have you gotten so lost in pronouns, political correctness, and being woke that you have simply lost your way? That you simply have forgotten, or worse, ignored the truth about American exceptionalism? I want you to consider that today. Here it is, the quote that you know so very well that is so lost today.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
The freedom of man. I encourage you, take a few minutes. Watch President Eisenhower's farewell speech from 3 days earlier, and then watch the 15 or 16 minutes it takes to watch this inaugural address. It's well worth it. It is an education. Today, Democrats don't ask what they can do for their country. Instead, they demand of their neighbors fealty to their religions of climate change and racism. They don't ask for, but rather demand that they be paid for the color of their skin or for the college education they voluntarily received. They demand that we kneel at the foot of their beliefs and abandon our own. They demand that we renounce America as an awful, unfair, and cruel place. Well, that's not going to happen, not here today and not ever, because nothing could be further from the truth. So I ask my fellow Americans that call themselves Democrats today in 2023, where have you gone? But more importantly, why? What would John Fitzgerald Kennedy say to you today if he saw what had become of his once proud party and what they are saying about his beloved country? I want you to think about that. Let it resonate. Let it sink in a little bit. And watch those speeches. Coming up after the break, how can we save America from what the Democrats and foreign enemies are doing and get back to the vision of old school Democrats like JFK and the vision he had for this country? I'll talk with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West straight ahead on America's Voice Live.